Welcome to another episode of Talking with Kevin and Son and talking about the people you should know. Hi, I'm Kevin McLemore. I am your show host. I'm a four-time published author, speaker, and mindset messenger. This episode is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Through the power of our stories, our mission is to uplift through the power of our voices, inspire, share stories and experiences, perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is simple: hope, helping other people every single day. Now, whatever your objective, successful people create a framework around their day to day lives that sometimes enhances their lives and many times they pour into others. This podcast will reveal the high effective life of understanding of delayed gratification and building on your dream life. Today's guest will share just how he escaped a life that was controlled by a government and came to a land of opportunity. Our guest will also share simple and doable steps as to how he turned bad habits into good, mastering small behaviors that led to big outcomes, plus teach us again about the values of delayed gratification. When it comes to immediate reward, when it comes to your wants and your needs, today's guest will share with you how to resist immediate reward in favors to rewarding futures, how to polarize long-term goals or immediate achievements. As and if you stay with us long enough, not only will you learn the connection between delayed gratification, but how a marshmallow connected our human behavior. Now, let me tell you about my guest. Freedom never comes easy, and some of us take it for granted. As a refugee from Cuba, we cannot overlook the value of our immigrants and what they've brought to this country. A renowned ophthalmologist and cosmetic surgeon with over 50,000 procedures performed since 1989. Our guest is a prime example of what this country truly stands for, the land of opportunities. In his featured TED Talks, he speaks of his journey to underscore the transformation of power and the patience, preservation, and self-discipline. His talk on delayed gratification talks about your superpower and your success. He's amassed through that TED Talks over 6 million views, making his TED Talk the third most viewed talk globally. He's a best-selling author. He is a husband. He is a father, and he is a friend. Let me introduce you to what I call the gift, Mr. Emilio Justo. How you doing, brother?
Hey, thank you, brother, man. That was quite an introduction, and boy, it must have taken you some time to put that together because that's the most incredible introduction I've heard in quite some time, if ever. But thank you,
Well,
Kevin. Appreciate
you
it.
know something. It's taken me quite some time, to overcome the obvious. If people don't know, last year, and I need to congratulate you because it's been a long time. Michigan won a national championship, and my school, Ohio State, happened to be a good fan of yours. We cheered you on. So congratulations. Um,
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
I wanted to put some
Hence the
time.
reason for my cap, and of course, you're wearing your bucknut outfit there. But actually, my head is starting to sweat. So,
Well, I'm going to tell you, I wish I could have I could take this off because this happens to be a sweatshirt and it happens to be outside, almost 100 degrees here in Philadelphia, and
wow.
inside the office, even though we have the air conditioner on with the lights and everything else, it's probably 98 degrees also in here too. So I'm going to have to grin and bear it and look for immediate gratification right after this interview is over with.
It's quite all right. You have my blessing.
All right. Well, Emilio, you and I have talked, and we have shared a lot of like stories on how we grew up, how we perceive not only the life that we're living, but how we perceive the world and how other people are living in this world. Now, I want to paint a picture for you. You have three children. You have Emilio Jr., you have Joey, 17, Emilio's 20. You have your daughter that is about to graduate, if she's not graduating yet, from high school. And you are the keynote speaker to her graduating class. Not only are you delivering a message to about six or 800 young people looking for the next level of their life, trying to find out their why, but you also are delivering not only a very passionate speech and a message that will never be forgotten by your wife, your children, and their children's friends, and the young dreamers that look at life as, opportunities may not be present to them, but your story will present an opportunity. If you may, I know you don't have pen and paper in front of you. Give us an example of what that speech would be like for not only your children, but our children to come.
Wow, great question, Kevin. Well, really, I think the speech right off the top, the speech would be grounded in terms of two arms, let's call it. First and foremost, what's gotten me to this juncture of my life, both professionally as well as personally, is what I refer to jokingly, but really quite seriously, is as my Cuban triad. I say Cuban triad because some of your audience may not know that I am a Cuban refugee to the United States. So that's why I call it the Cuban triad. What does it consist of? Well, number one, self-discipline. Number two, resilience. And that resilience is fueled by an almost obsessive drive to succeed. So resilience and obsession, which we can easily talk about for quite a bit later if you'd like. And then number three is delayed gratification. And those three principles have been my deep philosophies that I like to share with the world because it's truly what I feel has contributed to the success that I've had in my life in all aspects, in all aspects. But along with that Cuban triad, Kevin, I think that the other thing I would preach to not only our three children, but the world at large is that, we have to always be grounded, 100% grounded in gratitude and in humility. Greed, jealousy, envy, those things have to be removed from our life. And I know it may seem simple to do, but it can be challenging, but we really have to be grounded in gratitude and humility. And I think, in life, I truly believe that life is not a zero-sum game, that we can all achieve our highest aspirations. And it doesn't mean that if one person achieves something, that the person next to them should feel jealous or envious. They too can achieve something great as well. It may be in something different. It may be in a different aspect of their lives. But again, it's not a zero-sum game. So we should cheer on each other to achieve and excel to the highest degree possible. So those would be the topics that I'd really, would talk about because they're near and dear to my heart.
Well, I'm glad you preface it the way that you did, because right now that we are living and experiencing delayed gratification at the highest level. Many of our world's children are competing in probably the world's best competition in the world, the Olympic Games held in Paris, France in 2024. When you talk about the ability to want something instantly, you look at the fact that I met a young lady from Austria that had tried to make the Austrian Olympic team three times. That means 9 years, well, 12 years that she's tried, and she's finally made it. So when you talk about delayed gratification, you know, as speakers that both you and I have talked about, setting goals and achieving goals. We talked about creating vision boards. We're talking about somewhere down the line, fast tracking our life. And sometimes we fast track to going someplace, but many of us fast track going nowhere. You know, Goals and achievements and self-awareness, the ability to understand clearly what delayed gratification is in favor of a more desirable reward later on. So when you look at the Olympic Games and watch the fact that in each of our countries, our governments are at each other. Not saying our government just at home, and the difference is I'm talking about the world. We all have some difference. But you look at the fact that this is the only time that we celebrate the victor, first, second, and third, and reward them. for all the hard work. But not only do we reward them for all the hard work, you'll see that the victor has celebrated his or her victory alongside with every single participant that wears those Olympic rings. You being a man of great vision, how come the rest of the world can't see the clarity the way that you do and the way our children do? What are we missing?
Oh gosh, Kevin, I think that just the straight up answer to that is that the world at large, I truly believe, does unite for the most part. Okay, now that I think about it, there are exceptions, right? You see, unfortunately, the war going on between Israel and Hamas, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, I really do believe that as human beings, as individuals, we unite as one. We're all human beings, and I think regardless of your country of origin, that we're all unified. What creates the difficulty is the governmental bureaucracies and the politicians, because they're the ones who are all in it for power and for themselves, and not necessarily in it for the best for their citizens. Not universally. I mean, some politicians, do look out for their citizens, but it's that political climate that I think wreaks havoc and leads to the wars and the animosity between countries, et cetera. But you take the Olympics, that you're bringing up a great point. The Olympics, for the most part, is fairly free of politics. I mean, there's a little bit of politics, now, especially. I mean, I don't want to get into this too much. It's not my forte, but there's been some commotion regarding the whole gender identity, and I guess a couple of the Olympic athletes that have won medals did not test fairly as far as their own gender. So you can take that as possibly a political point. But regardless of that, the athletes are the athletes, and I think the athletes really have incredible respect for each other, regardless of it's their co-athletes on their own team or the athletes from some other country that may have animus toward us. I mean, I'm sure that I would venture to say that our American athletes have utmost respect for the Russian athletes and for the Chinese athletes, because they understand the self-discipline, the perseverance, the resilience, and the delayed gratification that each and every one of these athletes has undergone, without exception. I mean, even if you're lucky enough to make the Olympics the first time around, just think about it. I mean, you've had to train day in and day out for years. So that's by definition delayed gratification. And that intensive training of training 6, 8, 10 hours a day, that in and of itself is self-discipline and perseverance and resilience. So, I mean, each athlete in the Olympics, embodies what I'm talking about. So I think they view each other in a very noble way. I truly do. It's just that when you add to it the mix of politicians and politics, that's when, unfortunately, things start to fall apart.
Well, you do know you speak of the tone of a athlete yourself. I know coming from Cuba and escaping oppression. I know your mom and your dad brought you over here at I think you were about 3 years of age. I also know that you and I had talked about our sports careers and our dreams as professional athletes and whatever. I know Cuba has brought in some of the most amazing baseball players, and with a name like Emilio, how did you escape not playing baseball and ended up being an ophthalmologist?
Well, it's a funny question because I think I was very good at baseball. I mean, I love baseball. It was my number one sport. I was a pitcher, and then when I wasn't pitching, I was catching. Had an incredible arm back in the day, and and there was a point in time where I really thought, gee, maybe I want to try to excel at baseball as my professional career. But I'm also grounded in reality, and I've always throughout my upbringing, I really always cherished my parents and I really valued their opinion. And so I sat down with them. I remember one weekend, and we also had a friend, a close friend who was there, and we actually openly talked about this. And basically, they all told me, "Look, I mean, yeah, you're a good athlete, and yeah, maybe you'll make it in baseball, but statistically speaking, the likelihood is not in your favor. Just sheer numbers. Whereas you're an outstanding student." You can do pretty much whatever you want to do. And I had always thought in the back of my mind that I would become a physician because I always loved science, and I just had a drawing toward medicine. And they said, look, physician, that's well within your reach, and you can have a wonderful life. And so I thought about it, and I just kind of weighed in a very practical manner. I just weighed the two options, and I said, okay, I weighed it, and I thought, all right, I think I get their point, and I didn't want to gamble the rest of my life and maybe not make it. Now, some may criticize that and say, well, gosh, you didn't follow your dreams. Well, no, I mean, medicine was also part of my dreams. So it's not that I didn't follow my dreams. It's just that when you're taking that path, when you're going down that yellow brick road, there are different streets that you can turn on. And it doesn't mean that one street is better than this avenue over here. It just means it's different. And so the street that I took is a street to medicine. And medicine has served me well. I've been able to serve thousands of patients in my career and make a huge difference and a huge positive impact in their lives. So it's been extremely rewarding. And frankly, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that medicine has also provided me a good life and a comfortable lifestyle for myself and my family. Although I've worked tremendously hard, and I still do at my young age of how old did I say I was, Kevin? I think 28. At my
28.
at my yeah at my age, I'm still working as hard as ever, and I work a full time. I work 5 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day, and I enjoy it. Yeah, do I get home kind of tired, a little bit more tired nowadays than I used to 10 or 20 years ago? Yeah, perhaps, but I'm still going down that yellow brick road. But
Yeah.
in addition to that, I've ventured, as you know, since we've talked about it, I've ventured into some other things that I have felt that now is the time to really kind of diversify and look at other avenues of life that I'd like to share my journey and share what I've learned in my life with, first and foremost, my kids and my family. That's really what started all of this. But then ultimately to the world. I mean, I want to leave a legacy that will always be there, regardless of who looks at it or doesn't look at it. Like you mentioned, the TEDx. Well, the TEDx will be there for forever. It will be there forever. So long after I'm gone, people can watch those and hopefully maybe take a little, a little pearl out of it that they can institute into their own lives.
No, I am glad that you are leaving something behind for others to follow. As Tony Robbins said, life leaves nuggets, and I think you're leaving small boulders behind. I'm going to say something to you because last time we talked very intimate about life as being different. You say immigrant, I say people don't understand what it's like to walk in my shoes, and I think coming to a country, and especially a country that questions its ability to accept something different, we all go through our struggles. I talk about there's a system that is basically in place that challenges the opportunities for me. You and I have both kicked down those doors. Can you share with us, okay, acceptance or rejection, depending on the timeline of when you kind of felt different? I know I've asked this question of some my father. I asked my father this, and I'll go back when my sports career ended. I had crossed the street of Sixth Avenue going to a job interview. I was dressed in a black double-breasted suit. I had a red tie on, and I had a Coach bag, which I just had purchased because I wanted to impress the person I was interviewing. As I crossed Sixth Avenue across from Radio City, a young lady clutched her purse, went against the wall, and said, "I have a gun in my purse. Please don't hurt me." I kind of looked around to see, where the attacker was. And I said at that time, 6th Avenue, I was the only person standing there. I'm going, how did she see me as a threat? When I called home and asked my father had told me because of me being an outstanding athlete, the world had accepted me for my achievements, but they had not accepted me. He said, welcome to the world of being Black. As an immigrant, and I know you wear this badge, but coming over to America, not having much, okay, you can have your own television show based on this. How did you overcome the stigma that people had of you being not from this country to now accepting you as a productive citizen of this country?
Well, at the time, because I was young, I didn't really internalize it the way we're here speaking of it so prolifically. It's just part of my life. So basically, yes, especially in my early years, was when I was in uh, kindergarten, grade school, et cetera. There were some kids that perhaps made fun of me, and especially made fun of my grandparents who I was growing up with, because my grandparents hardly spoke a word of English. I was learning English on the fly because it was my second language. And so, they would make fun, and it was hurtful, but really I just pushed forward. I just pushed forward, and I was focused on doing well in school, and I always, from the very beginning, did amazingly well in school. I have always been in athletics from a very young age. So I really just kind of let my actions do the talking, if you will. I didn't have this some sort of strategy. I just kept focused and tried to let these things bounce off of me. But when you're young and you're a kid, you don't really think about it to the same degree that we're talking about it now, because you're just living through it. You let it bounce off of you, you push through. And that was, I guess, stage one of my, let's call it, discrimination. But a part that I don't think, if I recall correctly, I don't think you and I perhaps talked about, is that there was a second later part of what you might call discrimination. And that is that midway through my freshman year of high school, I developed one of the most severe cases of acne conglobata known in the medical literature. And Kevin, I kid you not when I tell you that I would sit in the classroom every day, and I literally had pus draining down my face every day. Now, think about it. I mean, do you know how embarrassing that is? And at that age, I mean, you're now thinking slightly more as an adult, and you see people around you, but both boys, girls. It's just incredibly amazing. Uh, and then on top of that, then subsequently, I developed this fever that persisted for over a month. So finally, I was hospitalized at Northwestern University in Chicago in search of a cause for that fever. Now, honestly, the doctors didn't know if somehow, I mean, they were doing all sorts of tests and scans and bone marrow biopsies. They were looking for some sort of insidious cancer that was inside of me. And there I was, in a hospital room thinking, oh my gosh, am I just slowly dying? I mean, what's going on? But after weeks of testing, the doctors finally determined that the reason for my so-called fever of unknown origin, as it was called, was these draining pus pockets in my face. So at that point, really, I just had to, I mean, I had no other choice. I had to embrace resilience and obsession, and I focused on my studies while I was lying there in a hospital bed. My mother would make the 1 hour trip and bring me my homework every day. And I would stay focused on that. Now, 2 months later, 2 months after being in the hospital, 2 months and three surgeries later on my face, I was finally discharged home and I was free of fever, but my face, which you may or may not be able to see,
We can see it.
was scarred forever. So, so throughout this, despite these setbacks, right, I had to have a mind shift and tell myself, hey, these setbacks are merely temporary steps back. And that in order for me to move forward, my progression requires obsession. So that's also been one of my mantras to myself. Progression requires obsession. And so, so I got back. I focused on my studies. I became very active in athletics in high school and school clubs. And you know what? Ultimately, and I tell you this not to boast or brag, but ultimately, going through that as a freshman, ultimately I became the valedictorian of my graduating high school class. And Kevin, the funny thing about this is that halfway through my senior year, okay, get this, halfway through my senior year, one of my buddies comes to me and says, hey man, do you know that you might end up becoming valedictorian of our class? And I looked at him and I said, really? What's a valedictorian? I mean, that's how naive I was. I mean, I felt so stupid asking that question. Here he's telling me that I may become valedictorian. I had no idea what he was even talking about. So, so the point being that, yes, I mean, we all go through challenges, and I don't think my challenges are really, when you boil it right down, I don't think they're ultimately that much different than most of us. They just manifest in different ways. But all of us, I mean, there's very few who can go through life and escape serious challenges in their life. So yes, the immigrant story, that was a challenge that I just had to push through. And now this so-called medical crisis, that was really that's really more at the forefront of my mind. I mean, it really has stayed with me. The immigrant thing, I can kind of push that aside, because as I progressed throughout school, even being an immigrant, I remember in high school, I took my studies so seriously, and I became so well versed in the English language that in high school, in English class, I would correct our teachers with grammatical errors and things of that nature. That's how good I became at the English language. So anyhow, that just to share a few little anecdotes.
So you're saying that you're auditioning to be my next editor for my book?
I might take you up on that.
All right, it's amazing. A good friend of ours, a mutual friend, Corey Poirier,
Sure.
um, often said that, he's an author, he's a best-selling author. And he said a girl broke up with him once because he didn't know the difference between fiction or nonfiction. He had to look it up, and he was an author. And it's amazing when we share stories. And the more times I've talked to successful people and they share their secrets to their success, not only in their success in their business careers, but in their life and how they overcome things, I've come to realize none of us have an original story. What the ties that bind are basically the location, the cast of characters, and how we react to whatever life has given us. And I'm going to say this because, you and I talked in the day that we spoke, and we spoke a lot about conversation that it would take 2 hours to share if we were to share it with our viewers. And I'm going to say, because I became so close to you, you're a brother from another brother, and I'm probably going to be the first podcaster who's ever going to tell you, I'm looking for a long life of friendship with you, and I love you, brother.
Thank
And
you, Kevin. I
so,
love you too, and you're just so down to earth, and I could talk to you all day, all night. I mean, you're just a soulmate. So thank you. I appreciate that very much.
well, don't worry. One day, a group of us, and I talked to Corey about this, all of us are going to be on stage, and we're going to share a stage, and probably deliver the most powerful message that any group of mindset changers has ever given. A good friend of mine, Les Brown, is one of the most top motivational speakers. Tony Robinson, Mel, You talk about Gary, Grant, and all those people. There are times that the next page to their story is opening up to the next page of our story. So there's a whole new crop of people. So I want to talk about your book, you know, your new book, talking about delayed gratification. Would you tell us about this book that you just released? And I've got a series of one-line questions because, you and I share a passion for quotes. And so tell us about this book and how it came about and why it's important that we as readers, we as people, we not only read this book, we share this book.
Sure, Kevin. So basically, let me take a step back. Before the book, my first TEDx talk was Delayed Gratification, Your Superpower to Success. And that talk was delivered in August of 2023 outside of Denver. And somehow, miraculously, that talk has over 6 million views on YouTube. Don't ask me how, it's an incredible thing. But as it was gaining steam a few months later, I started thinking to myself, well, gosh, I really need to maybe expand upon that 11-minute talk because it was a very brief talk. But if I even go back further, understand that the reason I selected that topic for my talk was for no other reason than, again, I go back to I call it wanting to leave a legacy for my children and then maybe someday grandchildren, not too soon because they're young, but maybe grandchildren, for my family. That was really the origin of why I did the talk, because as I've gotten a little bit older and, gotten into my late 20s, early 30s, jokingly, I do think about my mortality, right? I mean, I'm not going to live forever, and God willing, I'm not going to die tomorrow either. But still, now life is a little different. When you're young, you think that you're infallible and you're just going to go on forever. But as you get older, you start realizing, oh, your bones may hurt a little bit, or you got this problem or that problem. And so, so I'm taking this opportunity to really show our kids what really has gotten me to this point. So that was the purpose of writing the TEDx talk. The book came simply as a result of the positive reception that I got through that talk. And so I wrote the book called The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success. I also, as you may know, I think I may have mentioned that I also did the narration of the audiobook. So it's also on Audible. I really enjoyed that process. I must tell you, I love narrating books. I could probably do that full time. But so that was really the origin behind it. And then as I'm writing the book, I'm also thinking about, gosh, I really want to write another TEDx talk. So I started writing a TEDx talk called Unleashing the Drive Within, the Obsession Advantage to Unprecedented Success. And that talk has only been out on YouTube maybe 8, 9, 10 weeks. And it has, I don't know, 1.1, 1.2 million views. So it's also been received very well. And it's a talk that really also resonates with me because I talk about changing the paradigm of obsession from a negative connotation into one of a positive connotation, where this new obsession is not viewed as an unhealthy fixation, but rather it's a passionate commitment to our goals. And that's what obsession means to me. It's not a psychiatric disease, right? I mean, there is psychiatric diagnoses for OCD and things like that, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being committed and being passionate to what you're setting out to achieve. That's what I refer to as obsession.
And I'm glad you shared that with me. And I'm to my audience, his book can be is available on Amazon.com. It's also on Audible. It's Kindle, I believe. Is there any other place where you can get your book?
Yeah, it should be available pretty much everywhere. I know it's on Barnes and Noble. I just checked a few days ago, and it should be really at every major retailer. So it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, Audible, you name it. It should be pretty much available everywhere.
All right. It's a must read, ladies and gentlemen. I've read it. I've listened to it on Audible, and truly listening to the sound of his voice, you can hear it right here. So you get some idea of how the words are delivered, but you can also feel and get the commitment of every chapter, every word in the book, every quote that he shares from other people, that have left nuggets. And so please pick up his book. Go to Amazon and pick up the book. Go to Kindle, pick up the book. If you're driving or riding, traveling, or whatever, it's a great experience. Go pick it up on Audible. And the name of the title of the book again?
Is The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success. And, a little nugget, if I can just share with you, I don't know why
Go
this
ahead.
popped into my mind, but as I was narrating that book, again, I enjoyed the narration so much that I rarely had to do like retakes of my narration, except for one part. And that part was, I don't know if you remember, Kevin, when you listened to the book, but there is a dedication at the beginning of the book. And
I remember.
that dedication is to my wife, who I love dearly, and to our three children, who I love dearly. And that's the part, and gosh, it's almost getting to me now. I'm sorry. That's the part that I had to redo because as I was narrating that, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. As I was narrating that dedication meant so much to me, Kevin, that I want that book to be a testament to my life for my children and for my wife. And that was really the only part of the book that I had to do a retake on, because as I was narrating it, I actually started to cry, kind of like I'm doing right now, which I'm very embarrassed about right now.
Don't be
Uh,
embarrassed. That's just showing you you're a real man.
but
You're a good human.
anyhow, that was the one part that I had to redo.
It's amazing. I've always said, you know, a hero is nothing but a sandwich. Charles Barkley's probably said it before, is stop looking for sports heroes to be your heroes. He says your real heroes are your coaches, your teachers, your next door neighbors, your aunts and uncles, the people that pour into you. And I know how difficult this is because I said this to Vince Papale, the star of the movie Invincible and a good friend of mine. He played for the Philadelphia Eagles. I asked him, I said, Vince, I said, our sons were playing for an opportunity to go to the state. They were on opposing teams. And I said, Vince, I said, how do you do it? I said, well, my son does something very well. I said, as much of a man that I'm supposed to be, and that's a stereotype. I show up as who I am. So if I allow myself to be vulnerable, I allow myself, the world to see really who I am. And I said, how do you avoid from not crying? And Vince laughed at me and looked at me and said, sissy. um, and I love him like a brother. So I understand that. So before I go into deeper with the book, I have about 8 questions or 8 words that I want you to connect to delayed gratification. But I'm curious. You've got 2 TED Talks. I speak often of the power of your words and how words can build and change. And most of my conversation is directed to young people that are stepping out in the world or preparing to step out in the world. I'm in the process that I'll be coaching and teaching 10 young students at Cheney University, the art of storytelling and podcasting, come this fall in 2024. I need to ask you this. The value of TED Talk, you said 6 million viewers. How do you get a TED Talk? I'm just curious.
Okay. Well, technically, let me just make one small correction. Technically, it's a TEDx talk. A TED Talk is truly more celebrity driven, where they invite, super well-known people, like, for example, a Tony Robbins type person to speak. The TEDx talks are locally driven. They're under the TED umbrella, right? So they're licensed by TED, but there's about 1,500 TEDx events globally each year. So they're in all sorts of states, all sorts of countries, etc. And basically, the process is a bit challenging, I must tell you, because there's a fairly exhaustive application process. And the averages are, on average, that it takes about 90 applications to land one talk. And that's just the average. I mean, you might get lucky and land it sooner, or you could be unlucky and it might take you 200. But so basically, you find an event, and with Google now, everything is searchable, or you can go to the TED main website, and they'll have a list of all the events coming up. And then you fill out this application, which again is pretty exhaustive. And most of the applications, I mean, they're all slightly different, but most will ask you for a 1-minute video of yourself highlighting some bullet points. So in the application, they're not asking for the whole talk. So when I did my first one, Kevin, I hadn't even written the talk, right? I had just bulleted out kind of what I wanted to get across. And then they ask questions about, your background and your resume and past experience, blah, blah, blah. So then you submit that. And then depending upon the TEDx organization, they may then follow up and schedule a second interview, or first interview, I should say. Each one will be more or less discriminating in terms of what they want. So in my first talk, for example, I think it was like between March and May, I devoted every single weekend because, I work for a living, so I didn't have time during the work week, but I devoted every single weekend to knock out some applications. So in that 2.5-month period, I submitted 86 applications. And then it was time to basically have a family vacation. This would have been last summer. So my family and I are traveling in Western Canada, and we happen to be, I remember it's July 5th, it's the day after Independence Day, and we're sitting having lunch in Banff, Alberta, Canada, and I get a phone call, and right in the middle of lunch, and I took the call, and it was inviting me to do this TEDx event, which was outside of Denver, called TEDx Cherry Creek HS. And the talk was going to be in 5 weeks. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've committed to this. I was excited, but I'm thinking, man, I still have another week to go on vacation with my family. Then I have to get home. That's going to leave me 4 weeks. I have to then write the talk because I hadn't written the talk. I have to write the talk. I have to practice the talk. I have to memorize the talk. And then finally, I have to deliver the talk. So within 30 days, I did all of that and finally delivered the talk on August 12th of 2023. Now, fast forward to my second TEDx, I got a lead that, hey, there's a TEDx event in Eastern Canada at TEDx Western University, which is in Ontario, outside of Toronto. And so I went through the application process again. And like within a couple weeks, I hear back, hey, let's schedule an interview, like a Zoom interview. I did a Zoom interview. A week after that, I was accepted. So wow. The first time it took 86 applications. The second time it took 1. Now, one could argue that maybe, and I don't know this for a fact, that maybe the fact that they accepted me the second time so quickly, probably I showed credibility because I'd already done a talk and it had been so well received, right? So I think that gave me a heads up. Experience, quite a different experience each time.
All right. Well, I am going to outline my TEDx talk through you. Like I said, many of my conversations I have with young people, when I wrote my book, Indispensable Games of X's and O's, I tried to make sure that anyone entering high school was not going to graduate with the same degree that they could have been given once they entered high school. I wanted them to walk away with a plan. And then they had 3 years in order, just like the Olympics, to come up with a plan. And then their senior year, now you have to make some decisions on finding out your first level of why. So I'm going to throw a couple words out there that's going to be attached to delayed gratification. So I've always said to young people, stop feeding your distractions. I'm a person that, we talk about how to get stuff done. So the first word and connected with your book, your life experience, how do you not feed your distractions?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question, especially for young people. And now with the whole social media addiction, right, which is so prevalent. When you and I were growing up, we didn't have that, so we didn't have to worry about that distraction. Our main distraction was either maybe TV or maybe playing out in the yard too long, late at night playing kick the can, right? I'm sure you played that, but yes, so I think truly, I think that as youth, we need to just somehow discipline ourselves to spend our time in productive things, things that will feed our mind, feed our brain, and ultimately that will trickle on down to feed our life. When we get, I call addicted, when we get addicted to mindless things that really aren't going to make us any better, it just doesn't serve a purpose. So, what I try to instill in our kids, and I'm not suggesting that they're perfect, and I'm not suggesting that my methods are perfect, but is to, you know, spend time cultivating a plan to read audiobooks, to self-educate, to self-empower, to learn new things. And then as a reward, once you do that, then maybe sure, you want to do a little social media, then you reward yourself and say, okay, at the end of the day, I'm going to devote 30 minutes or 1 hour and do social media. But that should be almost a reward. And we should really try to focus on something that will liberate and embellish our mind. But it's a difficult thing, Kevin. It's a difficult thing for the youth. I mean, I don't know if I was growing up in today's society, I don't know if I would, get to where I am today. I think life was so much easier when you and I were teenagers.
Yeah, we didn't have those distractions, and thank God for sports that kept me focused. The next thing is time. We always talk about um, we don't have enough time in our life to do the things or to make things priority. Um, Delayed gratification connected with time. What do you tell young people?
I think time management is critical. And again, it's tied into that wasting time with social media and other things. I mean, you have to, first of all, you have to prioritize, write out, as silly as this sounds. I mean, I think at the beginning of the day, if you write out first the things that you need to accomplish, right? And just mind dump, dump those things out of your mind. So it might be 10 things, 15 things, 20 things, write them all down and then circle back around and then prioritize those things in true priority, because human nature is such that when we write down 10 or 15 things that we're going to do during the day, what do? We focus on the simple, least important things, and then we spend all our time wasted on that. No, we have to write out a priority list. Here's number one, here's number two, and then once you prioritize, then you put it into a schedule. Now, whether that schedule is in writing, which would be ideal, but if not in writing, at least put a blueprint in your mind of that schedule. And then that kind of forces you to work on the things that ultimately matter most and will be the most productive. And if you don't get to that number 15, guess what? Chances are that that number 15 really was kind of worthless anyway. So if you prioritize and really work on the things that you need to, I think the time will work itself out. Believe me, I'm sure it's the same in your life. I mean, my gosh, yeah, I don't have a lot of free time, but I also don't waste it. I don't waste my time just sitting in front of the TV doing nothing. Now, do I occasionally watch a little TV? Sure. But again, that's more of a reward. When I sit down, and my wife can attest to this, I'll sit down and I'll watch like an hour of TV. Yeah, but that's because I'm rewarding myself because I've worked and I've gotten so much other things done during the day. So it's a matter again of self-discipline, of prioritizing what needs to be done, writing it down. I think there's an expression for this. I think I've heard the expression time boxing is the expression I've heard, but this is my own. I mean, I'm not copying someone else's way of doing things. This is pretty much what I do on a regular basis, but there is a term for it, and I think it's called time boxing.
All right. So many of us, and I will say not all of us, and some of us have resolved and moved on. We walk around with, we're offended. We carry things with us from our past into our present, and it affects our present life. How do you deal with resolving past issues and how it affects today in regards to lining up a delayed gratification? Resolve.
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, this is going to sound overly simplistic, but just being sincere in terms of how I do it. Uh, what has occurred yesterday, and I literally mean yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, man, that's all out the door. I don't devote one iota of mental energy to what's in the past. I focus primarily on the present, but looking ahead to the future, of course. But I'm a present day sort of person, and that's why my what's a good example? My wife will ask me about something that happened 6 months ago that may not have been a positive thing. Something maybe somebody said something to me or did something to me that was somewhat negative. And I'll look at her and I'll say, well, what are you talking about? And she goes, well, don't you remember that so and so said this about you or whatever? And I said, no, I really don't remember. Because that's all in the past. I mean, my brain shuts off. I mean, I do not think of the past. And so if one can train their mind to just not think of the past and just think of the present and the future and what your next step is going to be and your next area of progression, that's to me, that's key. And for me, it's just always come naturally because that's just the way my brain is wired.
What about ego?
Ego of myself, of thinking of myself in an egotistical manner.
A lot of times, ego gets into the way, into the way of some people's progress. You know, when I'm teaching and I'm coaching, I always ask people, same thing was asking me, how coachable are you? And
Right,
sometimes people challenge it because they think that they are more than what they actually are.
right,
And
right.
it's going to lead into the second part of it is that part of my story and the opening of all of my speeches and my story is coming to your own truth of what it really is. And that's me putting my ego to the side. So let me rephrase it. Not so much the depletion of the ego is how important is it to be truthful with yourself. Most people would say be authentic when you present yourself, but we first have to discover before we present anything out to the world, we have to look in the mirror and come to terms with our own truth. How important is that to delayed gratification? Your
Oh, I
truth.
thought, yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to be 100% truthful with yourself and be able to look in the mirror and not put on this show that is disingenuous. That will never work, certainly not in the long term. You have to be grounded in reality. You have to check that ego at the door, and you have to really passionately and firmly believe in what you're preaching, what you're saying. I mean, you got to believe it. You got to live it. You got to walk the talk. I mean, you just got to do it. And if you don't do it, it's difficult. And what's a silly example that comes to mind, Kevin? I'm almost embarrassed to share this with you, but um, about 25 years ago, through a friend, he got me involved in a multi-level marketing company, right?
I know
And
the story you're going to tell. I've been there.
and so so they this company had a new line of vitamin supplements, and this company would put on these seminars in downtown Phoenix at a fancy hotel, a Ritz-Carlton, and they would monthly have these seminars, and they would have people come in and talk about the supplements. And I would see my friend go up there and talk about, oh, how the supplements, made him feel great and all this. I mean, we see infomercials all the time, right? You see infomercials about, oh, you take this supplement, you take that supplement, how it makes you feel great. And I'm a believer in supplements, and to this day, I take more than you can ever imagine.
Right.
But quite honestly, I feel the same as if I hadn't taken them. I'm just taking them on the hope that they're helping me.
Right.
But I got sucked into this, and then next thing I know, he talks me into being, because I'm an MD, right? I'm a doctor. I now have this authority or credibility. And so I got sucked into being one of those speakers and to getting up there on the stage and talking about these vitamin supplements and how wonderful they are and how they've changed my life. And I did that a few times. And finally, I went back to my buddy who I respected immensely. And I said, hey, man, this is feeding my ego because I love being on stage, right? I mean, I'm not shy to be on stage. I mean, if you have a movie that you're producing, Kevin, please let me know. I'll be the first to audition for it. But this is just feeding my ego. This is not doing the world any justice because I'm not really being sincere. I'm not being authentic. I'm just putting on a show, and that show may benefit the vitamin company and the multi-level marketing company, but it's not feeding my soul. And so I stopped. I finally stopped, and I'm embarrassed that I even let myself fall into that. But going back to your original question, man, you gotta check that ego at the door, and you've got to be sincere, authentic, and walk your talk.
All right. Overcoming your fears. And the reason why I'm saying this, because when I asked you about TED Talks, TEDx Talks, or TEDx Talks, you said going through the whole process. And, one of my fears was, and I think I told you this, I went up Pikes Peak, and I'm afraid of heights, but I continue to climb. When I got to the top of Pikes Peaks, I walked over to the edge and I said, I'm going to address my fears today. I looked over, and then when I looked up and I can see Kansas from Denver, I said, how can I be afraid of something that God has built? But when I heard you say that in order to do a TEDx talk that you had to have an application 86 times or whatever, and I said, I can probably get a good sentence out one time because I live with traumatic brain injury, but it scares the living crap out of me to expose myself. And I'm a writer. And the rewrites are what kills me, not the dumping out of the information onto it. But I have a great editor that knows me, that knows how I speak, that is very patient of understanding how my head works. So my first book was created from a journal that I had from 1973 to my last concussion, March 2nd, 2018. How important is it for you to track your daily activities, to write things down, or to journal? How important is that to delayed gratification?
Well, truly, I think writing things down, whether it be goals, whether it be celebrating small wins, right? Because along the way, you can't just wait for that big win. You got to be able to celebrate the small wins to be able to feed your soul and feed your purpose. And the more you can write things down, create a mind map, right? On a whiteboard. I think the more one actually goes through the act of writing things out, your brain somehow internalizes that, and your brain can actually help facilitate it coming to fruition. So I think that there's validity in doing that. Now, again, being sincere and authentic as I'm trying to be, have I always followed what I'm preaching to the T? No, I slip, and to this day I still slip sometimes. But then I come back around and I remind myself of what really is the best way to do that. And earlier you mentioned about fear. I think overcoming fear is a challenge for all of us, right? I mean, I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you that there's lots of things that I get very nervous, anxious about. You talked about Pikes Peak. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to a Tony Robbins event, one of his big events, which I used to go to a lot of his events. I mean, there's not only the firewalking that he's known for, but there's another event where you climb up a 50-foot telephone pole, and then you have to get on the very top of the pole, right? There's nothing that you're hanging on to. You got to stand on that 12-inch round pole. And then once you're standing there and you can actually feel the pole moving, right? When you're at the top, it's not, even though it's grounded into the ground, it's swaying a little bit. And then you have to jump off that pole, and there's a trapeze about 5 or 6 feet in front of you that you're supposed to lunge for and grab the trapeze. Well, man, if that doesn't take your breath away, and I did that many years ago, that was quite a challenge for me. Just more recently, my family and I went to Australia, and in Sydney, you have that beautiful harbor bridge that's iconic for Sydney, Australia, that you see everywhere. Well, they actually have a bridge climb that you do with the group and, with the tour guide. And man, I was there, and my wife had to stay behind because our daughter was so young. You had to be a minimum age, I think like 12 to do that. And our daughter was like 7 or 8. And so she had to stay behind. So it was our 2 sons and myself. And of course, I didn't say anything to my sons because I'm trying to be the big man, but I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm not sure I can do this, And, but I sucked it up, and we climbed up that harbor bridge to the very top point. And then there we stood looking out over the bay, looking out over the city, taking photos. And it was such an exhilarating experience, which I'm sure you can appreciate with your Pikes Peak climb, right? So we all have anxieties that we have to overcome. Public speaking is another anxiety. And even though I enjoy public speaking, I'll be the first to tell you that before I step on stage, whether it's a TEDx stage or coming up here in a few days, I'm going to be at Cambridge University giving a talk in England. I'm peeing my pants. I'm nervous. Now once I get on stage and once I get it going, then I'm in my mojo. But until that time, I'm a bit nervous. So overcoming fear of whatever, whether it be heights, firewalking, public speaking, this is part of life, and you just have to be able to challenge yourself and accept that challenge and just confront it head on. And ultimately, what's the worst that's going to happen, right? Really, what's the worst that's going to happen when you really think about it? So
you're talking to a man that climbed a 10-foot ladder and fell down and broke his neck. And
okay, all right. Well, maybe that could happen.
I said I'm not afraid of climbing up the ladder. It's the landing part that scares the crap out of me. So
yeah, I hear you.
I have one more question, and then I'll let you go back to saving the world and being the gift that you are. As you know, and as anyone in my circle knows, if I think really highly of you, most of the time you wake up and there's always a note. One of the things that came out of my last concussion is that my mind does not stop thinking. And as much as I may think that these are original conversations, I do think that I've been here before, and these conversations are just being recanted, and I recite them every single morning. So you get a note from me every morning that either makes sense, either touches you in a certain type of way. And what I talk about is, Dan Sullivan puts it as the gap and the gain. I call it positive self-talk or negative self-talk. How important is it for you to have these self-talks, and how do these quotes, especially mine, how do they land on you?
Yeah, when I first got the very first one, it surprised me. And I wasn't quite sure, to be quite honest, Kevin, I wasn't quite sure. Okay, I'm thinking, hey, is this a note that Kevin took the time to specifically just send to me because I'm his brother? Or most likely I thought to myself, well, okay, I may be special, but Kevin probably has a good circle of friends and influence around him that he's probably sending out this note to a bunch of people, which is fine. So the very first one, I don't know if you noticed, I actually replied back when I woke up, because the other thing is with our time difference, I don't know when you physically push the button, but it hits my text inbox at around 2 in the morning. So I had to learn quickly to turn off my whatever, my ringer, so that I
I
wouldn't get one.
apologize.
No, no, that's okay. I turn it off. But now it's kind of been something that I look forward to. So I do appreciate them, and I got one this morning, and you know, I like seeing them. I mean, number one, it shows me that you're out there alive and doing, you know, you're good for humanity, which I appreciate. And number two, it's always something that stimulates my mind. So I do enjoy them. And I want you to keep spreading them to your not only your immediate circle of influence, but as you expand upon a broader circle, you know, keep pushing it out there, because it'll all come back very positively for you, Kevin. And so I appreciate it.
Well, just to let you know, I have a very small but large circle of people that I trust and I open up to. You are amongst those people. So when I get up in the morning, I share with what's on my heart and what's on my mind, the people that are close to my heart and to my mind. So I am talking to you when I send you that. I get up every morning, a little bit after 3 a.m. in the morning, and I always write down my first thoughts. And then I share those thoughts because I think it's God's message to me of how to start my day and how I impact the rest of the world. Because I firmly believe that I am here to serve a much greater story than my own. And so with that said, I am going to flip the switch of the questions, because you know I have a list of 24 emotions that I know most people speak about, and we've covered about 8 or 9 of those with you, and you did it very well. And this could be a TED Talk all to itself. And I just want to say I appreciate you. Is there anything outside of how to get your book and how to get in touch with you that you've missed or you want to say?
Well, the only thing to your viewers, if they do want to learn more about me, if they want to watch the TEDx talks, which of course you can Google, but all of this information is on my personal website. I have a personal website outside of my medical practice website, and that website is dremiliojusto.com, and that's spelled DREMILIOJUSTO.com. And so on that website, you can see not only the TEDx talks, you can see all the previous podcasts and media interviews that I've done. There's also a contact page where you can send me an email, and I respond to all my email inquiries directly myself. I mean, I don't have an in-between person, so your viewers can definitely contact me, and I will most definitely get back to them promptly.
All right, I have 2 more questions. I am adding you to the list of 100 people that are living a successful life. So I'm going to ask you for your secrets to living a successful life. The next thing I'm going to ask you and give you some thought. I've asked this a couple of times. If you had one ask, and when I mean ASK, or one dream that could come true. Now, the reason why I ask this is because the people that follow and that subscribe to Talking with Kevin and Son are people that have a high call to action. I always say the people in my circle, they don't drive by an accident, they stop to help. I've had to this day 5 people that have answered this question, and some people live their whole life without having one dream come true. And I've had 5 people to this day that have total strangers that have addressed this question and made someone's dream come true. So when I ask you to ask this, I say ask big. If you had one ask, what would that be?
Well, if you're speaking of an ask for me personally, right? If it's a
Just
selfish ask,
however you want to interpret it, but I would say ask it. If you want something, if you lived your whole life, and I don't want you to leave this world, what leaving with your cup half empty, I want your cup overflowing. What would that
okay, all right.
ask be?
So I'm gonna answer that directly, and I'm gonna answer it purely on selfish terms, Kevin. So that's my disclaimer. So the one thing that I haven't yet accomplished, which I would love to, but quite frankly, I haven't just had the time to investigate how to do it, is again, there's that ego side of me that I love being on camera. I would love to either A, have my own talk show on TV, or B, simply be a guest on a talk show on TV, or appear in a movie, or more importantly, be the leading actor in a movie. Right. So those are my selfish asks. If you were asking me what my big ask is on a personal level, a more profound level, I would say that my big ask is that hopefully, and again, I don't want to sound too morbid. It's not that I plan on departing this earth anytime soon, but hopefully when I'm gone, that my family and my children will be happy and successful in contributing individuals to our society. And I want the best for all three of our children and my wife, of course. But I think about that. They're young. One of them, as you know, is in college. The other one is in his senior year of high school, and then our daughter is just starting eighth grade. So I want them to not fear putting themselves out there and to take on every challenge with so much positivity and gratitude and humility, which I preach about again. The world is their oyster, and I want them to take advantage of it in a positive way so that they in turn can serve the world in front of them. And service really, when we serve others, ultimately comes back around to benefit us. So we have to always keep that mindset.
Well, I do want to tell you, I can't put into words how much I've enjoyed this interview. Our personal conversations I enjoy, and I look forward to more of those personal conversations. And to our viewers, we have covered a lot of information. I purposely ran this show long. Normally, the average podcast should be 25 to 35 minutes long, but I'm a person all about content, and I think this is a story that needed to be told. We got a chance to learn who this person is, Emilio as a person. We've also got a chance to hear Emilio as a professional. We've also got a chance to see what's in his heart, what's on his heart. And that's the reason why I call him a gift. I hope this episode you will share. I hope this episode has enlightened you or touched you in some type of way that when you look out your window, not only do you see the world different, you see people different. If you have not followed us, then I would say go to RMK Productions and Network and follow us on our YouTube page. If you would like to be a guest or you have someone that we need to know, they're welcome. Go to info@rmkproductions.org, fill out the information. I would love to talk to you. I would love to share your story because I believe everyone has a story to tell. Emilio, I appreciate you. I hope that you will come back. There's always an open seat for you. Please make sure that when you do your next TEDx talk or any talk, please share it, and I will share it with the 10,000 people that follow us. And like I said, my grandfather always said, when you get to a point that you can help someone else out, he said, it is your duty to do so. I have a hashtag that says, find 1,000 reasons to be kind to someone. So with that said, reach one, teach one, and we're out. We'll fade to black. Thank you, Emilio.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you. Thank you, brother.